Russell Westbrook and the Oklahoma City Thunder have not been disappointing this season, but he did DM me on Twitter asking to get an intro, so I might as well honor his request. But today's video is going to be about teams that have done the opposite of the OKC Thunder, where they have had expectations going into the season, and they have not met them. Also, James Harden, another team and player who have not disappointed, as the Houston Rockets are one of the better teams in the NBA. So we're not going to talk about them, so of course I would put them in the intro because of that. So we're going to dive into the top 3 disappointing NBA teams this season, starting with the Detroit Pistons. They're currently 15-20 after winning 44 games last year. Let me get the good stuff out of the way first. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's offensive game has caught up to his defensive one, as he's knocking down his three-pointers at a pretty impressive clip this year. And he seems like a legit two-way player who's a defender, a shooter, as well as an athlete, so shout out to KCP. And then there's also Tobias Harris, who they pretty much got for free because they didn't even have to trade a first-round pick for the guy. His efficiency has been through the roof this season at around 48% from the field. He's also hitting his three-pointers, so it seems that the trade for him last season has ended up being a home run for the Pistons, and Tobias Harris still being pretty damn young. I think the potential is kind of through the roof for him, honestly, with his offensive potential. Hopefully the rest of his game can catch up. So those were the surprises. Now let's get to the other stuff. Andre Drummond. Drummond's a good dude, and he is a good player overall, and he's definitely one of the better centers in the NBA, and if he was not on this team, the Pistons would definitely be worse. But he really hasn't taken another leap this season. His offensive game is still pick and rolls around the basket, going to the basket, I should say. But defensively, he is leaving some stuff to be desired. Andre, he's not a god-awful defender, but when you look at that athleticism and then the output you're getting in terms of rim protection and his ability to move along the floor and play defense, it's just not the best. You can find a clip last night of him giving up a bunny to Dwight Howard very late in the game on like a tip-off, which is just general effort things. And the Pistons' defense overall has just not been very good this season. Their defensive rating is actually still pretty high because of some blowout wins early in the year. But lately, they've given up 122 points to the Wizards, 105 to the Pacers, 113 to the Chicago Bulls, 119 to the Bucks. The defense has not been very good lately. On top of that, Marcus Morris has not been shooting well. He's below league average in terms of field goal percentage as well as three-point percentage, so he's been a bit of a black hole in their offense. They're just going to need him to start knocking down shots, just point blank. But then they've also gone through some changes, as Ish Smith was the starting point guard given that Reggie Jackson was injured to start the year. Well, Reggie Jackson is now back, and they recently held a players-only meeting to talk about the fact that Reggie shoots too damn much, which is a little weird given that he's the same player as he was last year. But the chemistry has just not been there. It does not help that he's also way under league average on his three-point shot. They're just going to have to adjust to the fact that Reggie likes to shoot the ball. As of right now, it hasn't happened. He's also not helping by not making all of his shots. As I just mentioned, he's been inefficient. But hopefully he can turn that around, and hopefully the chemistry that he and Andre Drummond have in the pick and roll can begin to come back, because that was the foundation of their team a year ago that led to 44 wins. I do think putting the ball in Tobias Harris's hands can help. They have done this. He's never been just a complete off-ball player for them. But perhaps doing it a little bit more, even with Reggie in the lineup, can make them pretty difficult to defend, having two guys who can put the ball on the floor and do stuff. Now, as for the defense, I have to assume they'll get it together. I mean, this team was 13th in defensive rating last season, and they're pretty much the same roster, so I got to assume they're going to turn it around. Now, the Minnesota Timberwolves have dug themselves a bigger hole than the Pistons have, as they're 11-22. A lot of people thought, including me, that they were going to be perhaps a bottom playoff team in the Western Conference, above 500. The good thing is, offensively they're fine, as their big three are all putting up over 20 points per game. Zach LaVine's overall game has progressed pretty handily. Andrew Wiggins has continued his offensive surge, His outside shot has also improved. Has his playmaking and his defense really stepped up? No, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in terms of just putting the ball in the basket, this Minnesota team is definitely good enough. I mean, Levine and Wiggins is tough in and of itself, and I still think Wiggins has potential to be just really a top scorer in the league for a while, because you take that three-point shot and you combine it with the low post game that I seem to mention every single time Wiggins comes up in a video. I mean, he's pretty damn good. And then there's Karl Anthony Towns, who is basically a really talented shooting guard at the center position who also knows how to rebound and post up. And no matter what type of big man you put on him, he has an answer, whether it be to kill you from outside, his athleticism, or to just bully you inside the paint. Towns is pretty damn good. And I like the fact that he's been getting meaner. If you find certain YouTube clips, you can find him kind of yelling at someone after he dunks on him. All good signs. Signs that Kevin Garnett was there for a season. The offense isn't perfect. Ricky Rubio, because the guy can't hit a shot to save his life, makes it a little tougher on the rest of the team. As you can see, Thibodeau is really mad next to him. Well, Thibodeau's always mad. But defensively, this team is just not ready. Towns is willing to play defense, but he's simply not good enough. There's been quite a few questions about Andrew Wiggins' overall effort. If you go look at Nate Duncan's series of tweets on Wiggins, his effort is really questioned. And Levine seems like he can be okay, but the defense overall has been a problem. A future solution could be Nerlens Noel, as this team has a lot of salary coming up. Well, a lot of cap space coming up this season, I should say, and if Nerlens finds his way into restricted free agency, I mean, you could throw $20 million at him. They have that much money to afford, if that's proper English, and they definitely need to get better defensively. Now, would the spacing with Nerlens and Towns be the best? I don't know. I mean, one of them would have to defend power forwards. It's just an idea that I thought of off the top of my head pretty much. But if not Nerlens, someone. They need defenders, and they need veterans who know how to win right now. Those are pretty much their only options because they can't trade their pick because they would be trading their first-round pick 2 years in a row, which you're not allowed to do. Chris Dunn seems like a defensive point guard who can come on, but that's their best bet. Just draft someone this season because you can't trade the pick. Go into next year and just keep trying to get better on defense. Now, the Indiana Pacers are 2 games under 500 at the moment, and I picked them to be like the 6th seed in the East, so I wasn't super high on them, but I am a little surprised of how awkward of a fit it's been with them. First things first, Paul George is still really good, and it's weird because I feel like being a ball-dominant small forward that he is, maybe dominant isn't the right word, but oftentimes he has the ball in his hands for this team. He has the highest usage rate on this team, given how many minutes he plays and all that. But I feel like their recent acquisition, Jeff Teague, has had struggles playing off of Paul George because Teague is currently shooting below 30% on threes, and I think a lot of it is because he was the main ball handler in Atlanta. He comes over to Indiana, and it's not really the same thing anymore. And I think he's had a tough time. It has not helped how many bricks Monte Ellis has thrown up as well in their backcourt. So you have 2 guys in the backcourt who really can't shoot. And part of me believes to fix this, maybe you give the ball to Jeff Teague more often and you ask Paul George to play off ball a little bit more. It might be the way to go. Now, one big surprise has been Thad Young's outside shooting. Thad is shooting over 40% from 3, taking about 2.5 per game, so that's been one bright spot for them, and I think it could open up a lot of things if they make some rotation changes, one of them being, of course, start CJ Miles to give this team more shooting overall. Now, as for their defense, which hasn't really been that great either, I mean, the only real defensive player I see on this team is Paul George and Miles Turner in a couple of years. Could they acquire some guys to help them there? Of course. And I think that's what they should look for at the trade deadline. But I think it's going to be a combination of getting more shooting and perhaps a bit of a culture change, giving Jeff Teague the ball more often.